Ningaloo Reef off Western Australia's northwest coast has largely escaped the increasingly frequent coral bleaching. This year, wide-scale bleaching of Ningaloo's corals across more than 100 kilometres shows that no longer holds true. Its tropical and temperature waters are considered by UNESCO to hold outstanding universal value, and it's here parts of the reef have suffered up to 90% bleaching, killing up to 50% of corals after a record-breaking marine heatwave. Dr. Damian Thomson, a CSIRO coral reef ecologist with 25 years of research experience in tropical coastal ecosystems, who leads the Ningaloo Outlook project, is coming live from Ningaloo this morning to share his thoughts about the current condition of the Ningaloo Reef. I'm Ian Bunston. Welcome to Monday Matters. Welcome, Damian. Great to have a chat with you this morning.
Oh, great to be here, Ian. Thanks very much for having me.
Now, Damian, after 25 years of research in tropical coastal research, what do you say to those who totally deny climate change and that coral bleaching is just plain nonsense?
I love how we're starting with the really easy stuff, Ian. First up, look, I'm an ecologist, so I work with long-term data sets, and there's multiple lines of research, such as atmospheric measurements, ocean heat records, ice core data, coral coring data from very long-lived corals, and they all converge on the same conclusion. That is that the planet is warming, and that the primary driver is the activity of humans. So, whilst we all accept that, for many people, there's not sufficient evidence to allay their doubts. I'd say, my job is not to try to convince them necessarily, but what I can say is that, I'm an ecologist. I work with corals, and they're simply responding to the environment in which they live. And, coral bleaching, as an example, that's a stress response. So, that's a stress response directly to hot water. So in the case of Ningaloo, this marine heat waves produced water temperatures about 3 degrees above the long-term average for probably well over 6 months. And we convert that into a stress metric that's called degree heating weeks. And so we've seen unprecedented degree heating weeks at Ningaloo, and that's resulted in the coral bleaching. And one of the great things about corals is, they don't have an agenda. They're simply responding to their environment. So, in terms of, denying coral bleaching, you can't. It's just, it's a visible response to heat stress. And, that relationship is very, very well grounded in science.
So, with regard to the coral bleaching, Damien, what role does climate change play compared to local pressures like, say, pollution or overfishing or coastal development?
Yeah, so global climate change is the main driver for coral bleaching. Your local pressures are typically site-specific things, such as overfishing in an area, perhaps coastal development, localized water pollution, perhaps in some cases tourism impacts or resource extraction. Whereas your climate impacts are generally a large-scale things. So these are things such as a global ocean warming, marine heat waves, in combination with also things like ocean acidification and sea level rise. So these larger scale climate impacts tend to produce much larger impacts. So things such as coral bleaching over hundreds of kilometres of reef, in comparison to local pressures, which tend to be over much smaller spatial scales. So, perhaps hundreds of metres to a kilometre. So the local stresses, however, are things that we are better at managing. And the scientific argument for managing those local pressures stems from enabling it's thought to give the reef communities a better head start in dealing with the larger scale climate pressures. So if you can remove some of those local pressures, the reef is better positioned to be able to handle the stresses created by the large scale climate impacts.
So, Damon, with these climate changes, do you expect to see changes in species migration patterns, such as the whale sharks or humpbacks, if this bleaching continues?
Well, definitely, if you haven't been to Ningaloo and dived with the whale sharks, you've got to do it. It's absolutely incredible. And, they're just off the reef there. But coral bleaching in itself is unlikely to impact whale migratory routes or whale sharks because these animals don't depend directly on the corals themselves. However, you know, bleaching contributes to the ecosystem decline, which could indirectly influence things like whale migratory patterns and whale sharks by reducing prey availability, could change the conditions in the calving grounds, and also things like the acoustic environment underwater. That does change with large scale impacts like coral bleaching. And also with global climate change, we're seeing changes in large scale oceanographic patterns. So those sorts of things could impact whales and whale sharks, but coral bleaching in itself very unlikely to impact whales.
So, Damien, just picking up what you said earlier about the experience of swimming with the whale sharks, I'm assuming you've had that experience, and if so, can you just describe a little bit about what it's like?
They're amazing. The whale sharks are quite slow moving. They're generally small juvenile, well, they call them juvenile males at Ningaloo. 80% of the whale sharks there are juvenile males, around about 5 to 6 meters in length. They've got these spectacular spotted patterns that allows you to identify individuals. And they just swim very, very slowly. They look like the Dumbos of the underwater world, really. They're just very, very placid, very slow moving. Truly, truly remarkable animals.
One day, I hope to have that same experience. Damien, do you see hope for Ningaloo's recovery, or do you think we're at a bit of a tipping point, possibly?
I think Ningaloo is one of the best positioned reefs in the world to be able to deal with those large scale climate impacts. It's relatively free from local pressures. So, the local population's relatively low. The reef is very, very well managed. There are agencies like the Department of Biodiversity Conservation Attractions, CSIRO and AIMS do a lot of research there. And there's a really, really engaged local community that are passionate about looking after the reef and also the coastal stretch that is adjacent to the reef. And that's one of the really unique things about Ningaloo is that it's the reef is right on the coast. Unlike the GBR in most locations, you can step out of your campground into a little tinny and within 100 meters you're actually on the reef. Beautiful, lovely white beaches, lovely clear water. Globally, it's probably one of the best conditioned coral reefs in the world. Hence the reason so many people are so passionate about it. It's unlike probably any reef system that I've seen. It's not an enormous reef. It's only about 250, 300 kilometers long, but it's really special.
And you've touched on my final question a little bit already, but what can everyday Australians do to make a difference for the coral reefs? You mentioned the locals are very passionate about it.
I guess number one, we just need to make an effort to try and cut our greenhouse gas emissions. Reduce home energy use, switch to renewable providers, use improved efficiency equipment. Drive less, cycle, walk more, adopt electric vehicles, use public transport, but also, things like just think about where you get your seafood from. Try to purchase seafood that's, sourced locally, so it hasn't been flown halfway around the globe. We've got amazing seafood choices in Australia, some terrific wild fisheries. So learn a little bit more about where your seafood comes from and who's providing it and the conditions under which it's caught and things like that. Get engaged, have conversations with people about it is issues that matter to you. Read very widely on a whole range of topics and broaden broaden our perspective a little bit and try to be tough on long-held beliefs and challenge yourself. It's hard to do. It's really hard to do. But with that mentality, it improves awareness and it helps us to become more knowledgeable and more informed. It's probably, yeah.
So, Damian, I did mention in the introduction that you lead the Ningaloo Outlook project. Can you just briefly tell us what your most recent piece of research is?
Yeah, so the Outlook project's been running just over 10 years. At CSIRO, we've been working in the area for just over 20 years now. And the foundation of that work is these annual coral reef surveys where we essentially survey the health of coral and fish communities at Ningaloo, and they involve, putting on scuba gear and jumping underwater and doing what we love, which is, getting connected with the environment that we work on. And we'll look at things like coral health. So, for example, levels of disease, how much bleaching there is, and also look at the fish communities, how many fish there are, what size they are, what species of fish are there, how that's changing over time as well with things such as fishing, because humans, we have an immense capacity to exert pressure on our environments. We're very, very good at, for example, catching fish. And as a population, we can have quite a big impact on things such as fish communities. So, that's sort of the foundation of the work. There's also a whale shark component, which looks at fundamentally trying to work out where the whale sharks we see at Ningaloo, where they're breeding, where the parents are breeding. And there's some really interesting stuff coming out of that. We just had a genetic match with a Madagascan population, which suggests that all of these juvenile male whale sharks in the Indian Ocean are from a single breeding stock, which is, that's a world first. Some of the turtle work, has shown us that, the green turtles that nest at Ningaloo move quite widely up through the Pilbara region to feed and, then return later during the year to breed again. So, there's some really, interesting ongoing science coming out of those projects. And, we just, the Outlook project recently finished up, but, we're looking for new opportunities now to continue a lot of the work that we've been doing.
Damian, last night when I was just doing a little bit of preparation for today, I was looking at some videos of Ningaloo and the west coast there of Australia and thinking, wow, what a beautiful part of the world. I mean, I've got to ask you, when you get up each day, what part of your work do you really look forward to? Is it the diving? Is it the research work in the office? What really makes you excited getting up each day?
I really enjoy being in the field. Being underwater, on the boat, we've got a terrific team of people that we work with. Everyone loves what they do. Even the days where you're really tired, you wouldn't want to be anywhere else. There's a really unique sense of peace at Ningaloo. And one of my favourite views is just sitting on the boat, just off the front of the reef, looking back across the mainland, which is essentially desert. And, there's this very calming sense of peace and, feeling of connection to place, which I think is, one of the things that drives lots of ecologists into the work that we do. It's that, that connection to the landscape.
Dr. Damian Thomson, CSIRO coral reef ecologist who leads the Ningaloo Outlook project. What a delight it's been to have you coming live from Ningaloo this morning to share your experience and your journey, particularly 2 hours before us. We do appreciate you getting up so early to share with us this morning at Monday Matters.
Absolute pleasure, Ian. Thank you very much for the opportunity. And hope everyone has a fantastic week.